Before we get into today's episode, I want to share something that I'm really excited about. If you've been listening for a while and you're ready to stop just understanding this stuff and actually move through it, I have a course coming and I cannot wait to get it into your hands. It's called Breaking the Emotional Eating Cycle, and it's the first thing I've created that takes you through the actual psychology of why you eat the way you do. Not the food, not the rules, but the parts of you underneath all of it and why they're doing what they're doing. That's where things can actually change. And here's what I'm most excited about. Once you're in the course, you can submit your anonymous questions for me to answer right here on the podcast every single week. Women on the waitlist get first access when doors open and founding member pricing, which means the lowest price this course will ever be. To get on the list, head to megandarnell.com.au/waitlist or just tap the link in the show notes. It takes 30 seconds. Go add your name and I will see you in there. Okay, let's get into today's episode. Welcome to The Self-Led Woman. This is a podcast about emotional eating, the experiences that shape our relationships with food, and the path back to self-leadership. These conversations go beneath behaviour, held with deep respect for the wisdom of the body and the ways it learned to cope, adapt, and survive. And when we can peel back those layers and meet the parts of ourselves that need care, we begin to see that food was never the problem and we can return to who we really are. I'm your host, Megan Darnell. Let's dive right in. So I'm so excited to introduce today's guest. Our guest is Dr. Anita Johnston. She is a depth psychologist, certified eating disorder specialist, and author of Eating in the Light of the Moon, which has been published in 7 languages. She is the co-creator of Light of the Moon Cafe, an online resource with interactive self-study courses, live calls, and a supportive community for women around the world struggling with eating and body image. A pioneer in the field of body image and eating psychology for over 35 years, she has created programs internationally across the United States and is currently the founder and executive clinical director of Ipono, Hawaii Residential Eating Disorder Treatment Program on Maui. Dr. Johnston provides virtual individual consultations and conducts workshops and professional trainings internationally. She is best known for integrating metaphor and storytelling into her training as a clinical psychologist to explain the complex issues that underlie struggles with eating and body image. Welcome to the podcast, Anita.
I'm happy to be here.
I'm so excited to have this conversation with you. And we were just chatting before we jumped on. I was saying I've been reading your book and it's so nourishing for the soul, and I think that every woman should read it, but just the wisdom that you have to share. Like, I'm really excited for this conversation.
Good.
So, kick us off, for someone listening who's never come across your work before, how would you describe what it is you do, and also what makes this work personal to you?
Well, in a nutshell, I use old folktales and fairy tales from around the world, which I happen to believe are embedded with the wisdom that we need in our modern world today. And I like to use them to help people understand what's underneath the struggles that they're having with food or body image or eating or what have you. Because we so often just get stuck on this one plane of trying to understand and don't ever get to what's underneath it. And so if you just get rid of what's going on, it can pop up in another form. So I like to just take a deep dive. And the way I got into it, well, I'm originally from Guam. And I was raised, my family is mixed culture, part indigenous. And so I was raised with a lot of storytelling as a way of communicating deeper concepts. So that came fairly natural to me. But I didn't really understand how to use it in my work until my daughters were going to Waldorf school. I don't know if you call them Steiner schools there or Waldorf schools, but based on Rudolf Steiner's work, and all the teachings are done through story. And so my daughters would come home and tell me about, today we learned about Prince division and Prince multiplication. And I went, oh gosh, I would probably know my times tables now if I had learned it that way. Because I could see what was being done was the deeper understanding of the concepts was seeded in the stories. And so then I just started using metaphor and story to help my clients who are struggling with disordered eating or a negative body image, help them understand that there is more going on than meets the eye.
And that storytelling piece, what a gift that in your journey, but storytelling's so impactful and healing. And, I mean, one of my trainings, I did some training in psychedelic assisted therapy, and the person who we were trained by was mentored by Sharon Stanley, if you're familiar with her work, but very much that approach brings in the Western and Indigenous and just the respect and reverence for Indigenous cultures and the sitting in circle and storytelling and those, like, how healing that is. And I think that sometimes in Western thought just gets lost. So I love what you're bringing to all of that.
It gets minimized. And because our modern culture is so literal that we have a hard time conceptualizing the non-visible, non-physical world. And that's the world of emotions and intuitions and instincts. And so we barely even have a language for it. And that's what I've seen part of the struggle with folks that have issues with negative body image or eating is that they are very emotionally sensitive, highly intuitive individuals, but they've been discouraged from using these faculties. I mean, we all are to a certain extent, right? Oh, you're overreacting. You're too emotional. Just get over it. Or intuition is considered like crazy if you don't have the facts. And we're taught not even to listen to the instincts of our bodies, right? We're taught to eat when we're not hungry or not eat when we are or keep going when we're tired. And so I think we've lost a lot of that. And that's partly what's fueling the distress in people that come by this way of being naturally.
Absolutely. And that intuition piece, like, you're so right. And I certainly see that in my own work. Like these clients, I grow up and they're such sensitive little girls. Like they're so intuitive. And it's like, it's not encouraged. It's actually kind of squashed on the head almost.
That's right.
But that's where the gifts are, really.
Yep. And that's why I believe, and I believe this with every fiber in my being, because I've been doing this for a long time, that those who struggle with these issues and get on the recovery journey are the people the world has been waiting for. Because what comes with this, once they understand how to work with it, not against it, is an enormous amount of empathy and compassion. And that's what the world needs right now. But it's a matter of really learning how to work with these energies because they're superpowers. It's like if somebody handed you a sword and you grabbed it by the blade end, you're going to go, oh, this is terrible. But if somebody said, no, 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 you can hold it by the handle and you can cut loose of things that are trapping you, or you can cut through things that no longer are working for you. Or then it's like, okay, once you learn how to work with it.
Oh, yes. That's such a beautiful metaphor for intuition, because when we're connected to it and we're connected to our bodies and like what it's telling us, it really is like a sword can cut through the discernment that comes with that.
Yes.
Like so powerful.
Yeah. And even the word, right? The word intuition, think of that word, into it. So it's telling us that the answers are inside of ourselves. We just need to go a little deeper into it. And it's amazing what you can discover.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember being on a call with a client and she went to say intuition, but she stumbled over her words and she said, inner tuition. And then she said, oh, no, that's not. And I said, no, that's actually brilliant. That's exactly what it is. It was so beautiful. So to speak more to this metaphor that you speak of and you speak about extensively in your book, I was also looking through your food and metaphor guide, which I love, and how you connect the different types of food to emotional and relational experiences. But can you explain when someone's reaching for specific foods or having certain cravings, how do you begin to understand what that might be trying to communicate?
Good. To begin, you have to understand that there's more than one kind of hunger, right? There's the physical hunger for food and nourishment, but then there's what I call soul hunger, which are the non-physical hungers of our emotions or our spirituality or whatever it may be. But we don't know this, right? We're not told this. So the metaphor I like to use to understand this is the idea that we really do have two tanks. And I call them fancy terms like tank A and tank B, right? And so tank A is the tank you fill when you need physical nourishment. You fill it with food. Tank B is the tank you fill when you need emotional or spiritual nourishment. And you fill it with things like attention, affection, appreciation, meditation, prayer, and so on. But because we don't know this, we think there's just one tank. So before we know it, either tank A is full and overflowing, but we're still hungry, or we don't even want to get close to tank A because it seems like a bottomless pit. So what has to happen is you have to tease the two tanks apart so you can differentiate between the two. And you do that through the language of the body, which is sensation. So physical hunger is communicated to us through physical sensation. So finding your hunger and satiety signals from inside, not how many calories or what's left on the plate or any of that, but we have sensations that will tell us that. So the first process is learning what is the physical sensation for hunger and where in your body is it? And what is the physical sensation of fullness and where in your body is it? Is it a contraction, an expansion, a heaviness, a lightness, roughness, smoothness, hollowness, density? I feel like pizza is not a physical sensation, right? It's something in the body. So we begin with that because once you can understand that, then you can pull the two tanks apart. Because in the absence of a physical sensation communicating to you, then you know we're not dealing with physical hunger. We've now tumbled down Alice in Wonderland's rabbit hole. We've landed smack dab in tank B, and in tank B, food is not food. What is it? It's a concrete physical symbol of another kind of hunger that you're experiencing and may not even know about. So we begin with that, right? We rule out physical because pizza is just pizza if you're physically hungry. But if you're not physically hungry and you eat it, or you are physically hungry and you won't let yourself eat it, then it's not pizza anymore. It's a symbol of another kind of hunger. So the next step is, okay, so how do we find out what is that other hunger? Because it's not conscious. And so what that means is it's out of your awareness, and that's why it's having an impact on you, because when things are unconscious, they're forces that impact us, but we feel them, but we don't understand them. It's the difference between like if you were in the trunk of a car and it's going down a hill and you're getting thrown around, it's terrifying. But if you were behind the wheel of that car, now you have some agency, you have some say, how fast to drive, how tight to take the turns, and when to put on the brakes, and still the same hill you're going down, but it's a different experience. So the idea is then these other hungers are unconscious. You want to bring them into conscious awareness so you can have some choice about them. And the good news is the foods that you are wanting to eat or not letting yourself eat will tell you what they are because they're talking to you, but they're talking in code. And to understand it, you've got to crack the code. So that's where metaphor comes in, because metaphor is not something just poets use. It's how we use one thing that we understand to describe something else that's very difficult to understand or explain. So the word metaphor means to cross over. It takes you across to a whole other level of understanding. So when you understand that the foods that you're craving or fearing are speaking to you, but they're speaking through metaphor, then you'll crack the code. And the way you do this, and I like to offer a simple example like I've done in the code, is even though we're all totally different, it helps you begin to start thinking in metaphoric terms. So the code is sweet things. Sweet things have to do with either feeling like there's not enough sweetness in your life or you're not sweet enough. Think of the way you use the word sweet. We don't use it just for food. We say, oh my gosh, that's so sweet. Or he's a real sweetheart. Or, whoa, where's the sweet spot? That's sweet, right? We use that word. So in our psyche, we understand it has other meanings. And so when you start to look at the sweet foods that you're struggling with, it's telling you something about whatever sweetness means to you in your life. Crunchy, salty foods are typically connected with unexpressed anger and frustration. Think about like if you want to bite someone's head off, right? And so that sensation is connected to that emotion, especially when it's not being expressed clearly and directly. Warm foods, think of the word warm. We talk about someone being warm-hearted or cold-hearted, right? It has to do with a craving often for emotional warmth. Spicy foods have to do typically with a desire or a fear of, it can go either direction, excitement, stimulation, and change. Chocolate, we know from Valentine's Day, right? That's love and romance and sexuality and sensuality. And they just discovered a new one. So they did this cross-cultural research all around, and they found that sour foods are connected with risk-taking. So whether it's healthy risk-taking where you try something new or it's like you're overdoing it. So it's so interesting because these are things that then help you tap into what's really going on.
That's so good. Thank you so much for that explanation. And also the piece around avoiding those foods or fearing them. I mean, I've spoken before about our relationship to like food, obviously, and like that is a mirror of our relationship to our emotions. And like when we are struggling with food, we often can't digest our emotions. But
Exactly.
the whole I don't want to eat that, I'm afraid of it. I talk about chocolate like it's like you act like there's a bomb in the house. Like, get that away from me.
Yeah.
It's also your relationship to being able to receive, not just food, but in general.
Exactly. And it can, you can understand that if it's scary if you don't know how to say yes to what you want and no to what you don't want. Then, these things can really get scary. For example, my treatment center, Ipono in Maui, I was sitting with a young woman and her fear food that she really struggled with was peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. She would run out of the room. And so, but when we do what I call playing with your food to see what that was. And just as we were I said, well, I want you to tell me what is so horrible, what is just, so disgusting about this food. And she said, well, the jelly is so sickeningly sweet. And the peanut butter, it's sticky, gets all over. And then you're smushed together by the two pieces of bread. And when she said it, she realized that she was talking about her relationship with her parents. Her mother was like overly, cloyingly sweet, sweetheart, everything's wonderful. And her father was super overprotective, and they were not getting along, and she was caught in between the two of them, and it was all there in the sandwich.
It's so fascinating.
It is. And again, once you start to learn to think metaphorically, she decoded it as she could hear herself describing, using her metaphorical ears, describing this food. So it really is more of a playful way to approach it. And goodness knows, recovery can be very painful. So anytime that you can have a little bit of fun with it and it is revealing to you, I think that's worth a whole lot.
Absolutely. And yeah, you're right. Like recovery for some people can be really hard. On my own journey, I've had it was terrible at certain points and coming out the other side. And I work with internal family systems, and I noticed something you shared on your Instagram recently, which is very much aligned with my own beliefs, that there is no disorder. Like you shared something about there's no such thing as an eating disorder in the way that we tend to think about it. And if you could speak to that, like if you could explain to listeners, what do you actually mean by that? And how does that change the way we understand these behaviors?
Yeah, it's basically you have to straddle the paradox because on one hand, yes, eating disorders are about food because they're eating disorders. But on the other hand, they're not about food. And the not about food is the bigger piece. And it's the same with the body image. It's about the body because we're talking about but the not about the body is the bigger piece. And so, just kind of, you have to learn how to maneuver through this paradox, because that's what it is. But I think this idea that you talk about the family systems, that we have many different aspects of ourselves. So oftentimes we can be in conflict. So at the Light of the Moon Cafe, where even though it's online, we're able to really we work a lot with the inner mother and the inner father. So you see, a lot of people focus on the inner child, which is important, but who's going to parent that child? Most of us, in fact, I would say none of us ever got the perfect parent. It's never happened, never will. And so I always go, well, whose idea was that, right? Why didn't we get here we are on this planet and you don't even give us the parents that we need? And I've come to realize that's because it's our job. It's our job to create that within ourselves. And the way we do it in the old days, I'm talking about the old days, we used to make photographs out of negatives, right? Now it's all digital, but it used to be you had to have a negative to make the photograph. And so you start with the negative, what you didn't get from your parents that you really wanted and needed. And from that, you craft your own inner parents. And the reason why this, I think, is really important is that the concrete physical symbol of mothering energy is food. So when you think of mother archetypally, which archetypes are giant metaphors, they're metaphors that cross all culture, all time. And so if you take the concept of mother and went back in time, you would find it. If you could go into the future, you'd find the concept of mother. If you could go to any culture on the planet, you'd find the concept of mother. So Carl Jung said that with alcoholism, what's happening is the person is really thirsty for spirit, but they're reaching for the spirit in the bottle. Marion Woodman, Jungian analyst, she said a woman struggling with an eating disorder is wanting mother, but she's reaching for the food. I take it a step further, and I call it mothering, because I think it's very important to understand that it's a verb. It's not a person. It's not a thing. It's an energy, an energetic constellation that we understand is nurturing, comforting, and soothing. And so it's very easy, though, to see how the wires get crossed and we concretize and think, well, if I didn't get it from my biological mother, then I'm screwed. Oh, well, for me, Or we would reach for the food or reject the food, depending on our fears around that, because you can have 1,000 flags of your country. Does that mean you're more free? No. It's only the symbol of freedom. It's not freedom itself. And so it is with food. It's a symbol of mothering energy, but it's not the real deal, which is why it never works, why you have to keep restricting more or binging more. It never ends because you're never really getting what you're wanting. So once you can start to understand what mothering energy looks like and feels like, and you start to, I say create it within yourself, but that's not really true because we're born with these archetypes, just the way we're born with our genes. So it's really a matter of quickening that archetype and bringing it into consciousness, then you can work with it deliberately and get very clear about how is it that you're needing to be comforted and nurtured and soothed. Because when you understand that, and a lot of people say, oh, great, one more thing I have to do myself. It's like, no. Once you can find that within yourself, it will open the doors to finding it outside of yourself because it's archetypal. It's inside and outside. So you can get mothering from your dog. You can get mothering from your husband. You can get mothering from a coworker or friend. You can get mothering from Mother Nature. There's a reason we say Mother Nature. We don't say Father Nature because at a deep level, we understand how nature nurtures, nourishes, comforts, and soothes us. So again, moving away from the physicality of what you're struggling with to understanding the energetic around it, because you do that and you can clear this thing.
Absolutely. Actually, I had someone else on the podcast. She's a naturopath and she works with like Chinese medicine principles. And we spoke
Hmm.
about sweetness and that
Hmm.
symbolicness of sweetness. And she said that's so interesting because the element for sweetness is earth, Mother Earth.
Yes.
Like, of course.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Yeah. So you also speak to, and I mean, you touched on this, but like how we need to understand the purpose of our behaviors in order to heal. So, what are patterns like emotional eating, restriction, or binging actually trying to do for someone?
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's really important because if you're wanting to put the eating disorder out of a job, you better first find out what his job is. If you're going to just fire it, then what, right? So, the metaphor that I like to use to explain this, and it's now my favorite because I get emails from people all over the world saying this helped them reframe their understanding of their eating disorder and open a lot of doors for recovery. So now it's my favorite. And so you imagine on the banks of a raging river. It's pouring down rain. You slip, you fall in, you are drowning. You're getting pulled down through the rapids. And along comes a big log, and you grab on. And this log saves your life. It keeps your head above water when surely you would have gone down. And eventually, it carries you to a place in the river where the water is calm. And from there, you see the riverbank, but you can't get there because of the log. So now, the irony is the very thing that saved your life is now getting in the way of you going where you want to go in life. And of course, we understand that's what happens with an eating disorder. But then it gets more complicated because there's always someone on the riverbank yelling, let go of the log, let go of the log. And you feel like an absolute idiot because you can't let go of the log. Well, the way I see it is letting go of that log may not be the best thing to do initially. Because what happens if you let go of the log, because that's the top eating disorder specialist, or that's the person who loves you more than life itself, you start to swim to shore, get halfway there, and realize, oh, I don't have strength to make it. That means you don't have the strength to make it back either, and you're really sunk. So I believe that we all have a wise part of ourselves that will not let us let go of anything until we're good and ready. So what do you do instead? Well, let go of the log and try floating. And when you start to sink, grab back on. And then you let go of the log and you tread water. And when you get tired, you grab back on. And then you let go and you swim around it once, grab back on. Twice, grab back on. 100 times, 200 times, whatever it takes for you to have the strength and confidence to make it to shore. Then you let go of the log because you have put it out of a job. So when I use this metaphor, I'm trying to do a lot of things with it. First of all, I'm trying to dispel some of the shame. It's like, well, no wonder you grabbed onto this when you had no other resources to cope with these strong emotional currents that were pulling you down. Well, no wonder. Not a bad thing to do, by the way. But the problem is now you have to develop certain skills that are going to help you stay afloat so that you can get where you want to go in life. And so then the work begins. Okay, what are the skills that a person needs to learn? Well, maybe it's emotional literacy, learning how to ride the waves of their emotions rather than trying to fight them. Maybe it's assertive communication so that you learn how to be in relationship with someone else without abandoning yourself. It's creating boundaries so that you don't absorb everybody else's nonsense. So it's really a matter of, well, now what are the skills I need to learn?
Absolutely. That boundaries piece is such a big one. And I see that with my clients all the time. They struggle with food, but it's because they're just people pleasing all day long. They're saying yes to
Yeah,
things when they don't have capacity. And then they're getting in the fridge at 10 p.m. and they're like binging. But it's like you're
totally.
trying to stuff down all the emotions you've been suppressing.
Mhm, mhm, mhm. Yeah, that's why I happen to believe that the number one skill I've seen thousands of people totally, completely recovered, period, from the most severe eating disorder you can imagine, or someone who has struggled their entire life for decades. But I've never seen anyone recover without developing the skill of assertiveness, which is the ability to identify, accept, and express your feelings in a way that honors your experience, but also honors the experience of the other person. And this is so fundamental to recovery that, sure, you can get fairly far down the recovery path without it, but you're not going to get all the way to complete total recovery without it.
Absolutely. And it's like, I guess, cultivating that inner mother, like that archetype of like, being okay with being able to like stand up for yourself, protect yourself, all of those things. So
Mhm.
you are able to speak your truth. Like so many people talk about boundaries online, they'll give you a script, and it's like, no, you actually need to feel that in your body first. Otherwise, you're going to
Yeah.
say the script and then you're going to feel like you've been chased by a bear for the next 6 hours because you're
Right,
not
right.
like it's not integrated.
Yeah, it's like actually that's where you need those inner parents because the inner mother will say, "Wonder you're upset about this. I understand." The inner father, so father ing, which is also an energetic constellation, it's the energetic constellation of safety and security. It's the energy you need to move confidently and securely through life. So, inner father knows how to set boundaries, knows how to break things down into small steps. Inner mother is you're okay just the way you are. Inner father is all right. Now let's take care of business. Let's get practical. You want to get together with that person. You've never met him before. Why don't you go with a friend? It's like it's that voice. So we need both.
Absolutely. Now, I want to shift gears a little bit because there's something that I wanted to speak to that you speak about in your work, and it really stayed with me. This idea of what you name the fat attack. So I would probably my work
Mm-hmm.
name that an inner critic part or a very
Mm-hmm.
intellectualizing part, but because it can almost feel like the mind is just working overtime when we have what we call a fat attack. And I think so many women know exactly what this feels like
Mm-hmm.
when there's this sudden wave of criticism or fixation, obsessing over the body, and the
Yeah.
mind just locks onto it. So can you
Mm-hmm.
explain
Mm-hmm.
what's happening in those moments?
Mm-hmm.
And just how
Yeah.
you what a fat attack is and what's
Yeah.
actually underneath that.
Okay. So what I call a fat attack is when you wake up in the morning and you feel like you've gained 20 pounds overnight. You know logically that's not possible, but every fiber in your being feels like it, right? So that is like it's intense. So I like to explain the neuroscience behind it because it is something that is happening in your brain. So, um we humans, we're not born with our brain fully formed, right? It comes on board bit by bit by bit. And the last part to come on board is our frontal lobes, which is our abstract reasoning. And they don't even fully, completely come on board until we're in our mid-20s. Now, who knows this? Car rental companies. Try to rent a car before you're 25. They're going, no, no, no. We want someone with frontal lobes that can see the bigger picture and anticipate problems down the road, right? So, because of this, and this is the case for all of us, when we are younger, the structure of our brain affects the way we think. And the way we think, all of us, is when we're little, bad things happen. I feel bad. I must be bad. Mommy and daddy got a divorce. I feel bad. It must be my fault. Right? So, but then what happens as we get older and more of our brain comes on board, we go, my gosh, there's 1,001 reasons why mom and dad had a divorce, and it has nothing to do with me, right? Because we have more faculties that we can work with. Now, imagine this. Imagine that you're growing up in a family or a culture that is fat phobic, that says fat is bad. We got to have no fat, non-fat, low fat. Does this make me look fat, right? It's like it's everywhere. So your brain is developing, and what we know about the brain is that neurons that fire together wire together. So what happens in your brain is bad things happen. I feel bad fat because they're wired. Fat is bad now. I am bad fat. And so what has to happen is we have to use the faculties we now have as we're older and re-examine that. But it's going to first be automatic is why something's wrong. What's the first thing you see is your body and it's too fat, and it's because it's linked. Bad, feeling bad, and being fat are the same thing in your brain. Now, fortunately, we are not simply our brains. We have a consciousness, and we can use our consciousness to upgrade our brains, right? We can change that by awareness, by becoming aware. So looking to see, like if someone is having a fat attack, look to see what was the thought you were having just before that? Because there's clues in that. What were you feeling bad about before you decided the problem was you were too fat? And so it's a bit of a detective work, but that is, you have the faculties now, because you're not 7 years old, to really re-examine the story that has connected these neurons together. So that's my explanation.
Yeah, amazing. And you do also speak about like what you just touched on there, but you speak a lot about using curiosity and like I say that all the time, like the world would be a better place if we had more curiosity. But what do you see tends to shift for someone when they stop trying to actually control their eating and actually start listening to it instead?
Well, they have a different relationship with it, right? Because the control involves judgment and the listening involves curiosity. So you're right in the sense that the curiosity is the antidote to the inner critic or the inner judge. And you know, you can be a little compassionate towards that side of yourself. It's sort of like the inner critic is sort of like a stupid friend. You know, like they may mean well, but they come up with really stupid ideas of what to do that's going to get you into trouble, right? So it's trying to protect you, but its idea of protecting you is like, well, let's criticize ourselves first before anybody else does, and then they won't criticize. It's like, that's not how it works. But your inner critic doesn't know that, right? So it just kind of just jumps right in. So again, it's quite immature, and fortunately, the more you connect with your authentic self, I mean, that is actually what recovery is, in my mind, is when you strengthen that connection within your true self, your authentic self, who you really are.
And that's, I mean, I believe, and I'm sure you do too, but we have all the answers within us. I mean, you speak so beautifully as metaphor and actually decoding the messages, whether it's what we're choosing to eat or not eat or our behavior. But we really do have like so much wisdom and everything we need within ourselves to heal. We just need to slow down enough to listen.
And I think slow down is really the key. Those two words, slow down. So it really helps you drop into who you are, the essence of who you are, that when you go too quickly, you lose that connection, especially if it's not really strong in the first place. And for many of us, it isn't, right? Because we've been trained to disconnect. So I think a lot of times I like to explain to people, okay, how did this happen in the first place, right? Well, and the way I conceptualize it is that we are mammals. And because we are mammals, we're born with two very powerful drives. And one is the drive for connection or attachment, because we're not lizards. We're not turtles. We don't just hatch out of an egg and see you later on our way. No, we're mammals. That means we have to connect and attach to our caregivers in order to get fed and taken care of our entire childhoods. Now, but because we're human mammals, we're born with another equally powerful drive, and that's the drive for authenticity. That's the drive to be who we're meant to be in this life, to go where we're meant to go, to live our own unique destiny. And what happens to all of us, but some more than others, during childhood, these two drives come into conflict. And guess which one wins? Attachment. Connection. It has to, because our survival depends on it. So what this looks like is little kid says, I want a cookie. And mommy says, no, you can't have a cookie. We're having dinner in an hour. And little kid goes, I want a cookie. I want a cookie. And mommy says, if you don't cut that out, you're not getting any cookies at all. So little kid goes, okay, I don't want a cookie. Because little kid knows I got to be the way mommy wants me to be in order to get my needs met. Now, this is a little example, but you can imagine how often that can happen. And in some families, how often it has to happen in terms of your survival. So what then can happen is that, and mind you, if you emotionally sensitive and highly intuitive, you're really, really, really good at picking up on how others want you to be and being that, even when they don't even know it, right? So what happens then is a pattern of whenever these two drives come into conflict, attachment and connection always wins, then that pattern gets carried into adolescence and adulthood where authenticity really needs to win. And the reason for that is that whenever you are acting one way, because that's how others want you to be, and feeling something different, it creates a tension in your being. Think of a towel being twisted in two different directions. And eventually that tension becomes painful, and you will do anything to alleviate or distract or numb that pain. And for many people, that's the vacuum that the disordered eating steps into. So what recovery really is learning how to engage with others, because we're social animals. We need to do that without disconnecting from self. So what can happen is someone will say, okay, I can be myself as long as I'm by myself. So they isolate, or they create an eating disorder bubble around them that nobody can access. And then they go, okay, now I can be myself, but it's very lonely. And that creates its own problems. Or they'll enter a relationship and leave a big chunk of themselves at the doorstep. And then eventually that tension starts to build, and then they're in the throes of the eating. So the recovery process is learning how to stay connected to your authentic self and participate in relationships at the same time. And that brings us back to the assertiveness piece, because that's the tool in my mind that helps you do that.
Absolutely. And what you said before about the assertiveness piece being able to acknowledge your own experience, but also being able to acknowledge the others. And that's, I see my work, because we work with parts, but people who have the biggest struggles, they have a polarization. They've got two parts fighting against each other, and it's being able to hold the and. So being able to hold, I feel this way, but I also understand you feel this way, and I don't want our relationship to be affected by this, and being able to have the assertive conversation where you can actually speak for those parts and honor it.
Exactly. And and with the parts, it's like we're all trying to get to wholeness. So you can't be abandoning any parts of yourself, because they're going to come along and someone's going to pick them up and put them right back in your face.
Absolutely.
So you dropped this.
Yeah, absolutely. And my final question, which is also my favorite question ever. If a woman is listening right now and her body could speak to her uninterrupted, what would it most want her to hear?
If her body could speak to her
Uninterrupted, what would it most want her to hear?
the words that come to mind are love me.
Yeah.
I'm your best friend. I'm going to be with you from the day you were born to the day you die. I will never leave you. Just love me.
Oh, that's so beautiful and so true. Amazing. Thank you so much, Anita. It's been an absolute delight to have you here and you sharing your wisdom. I will share all your links in the show notes, but if anybody would like to find you, what's the best way they can do that?
Can go to lightofthemooncafe.com. I have a lot of free materials and little courses. I have a course on assertiveness. I have interactive courses, self-study courses, and you can always leave me a message and I'll get back to you with any questions that you might have.
Amazing. Okay. Well, thank you so much for being here.
Bye for now.
Bye.
No, this podcast is for education and reflection only. It is not a substitute for therapy or healthcare. If this episode brought things up for you and you need support, please reach out to a trained therapy practitioner or health professional in your area. Thank you so much for listening. If this episode resonated, please follow or subscribe to the podcast, leave a review, or share it with someone who might benefit from hearing it. You can also connect with me on Instagram at Megan Darnell Therapy. If you share the episode or want to let me know what landed for you, you're always welcome to message or tag me. I love hearing from you guys. Until next time, I'm Megan Darnell, and this is The Self-Led Woman.